What my daughter did that day in the park should have been a simple act of kindness. Instead, it became a lit fuse on a bomb that would detonate the life I'd carefully rebuilt. This is the story of how a 6-year-old's question to a stranger, a woman reading alone with tears in her eyes, unraveled a secret and forced me to make an impossible choice. I'm Leo, a single father to Chloe. Every Saturday was our sacred ritual, pancakes at our favorite park cafe, a fragile bubble of normalcy I fought to maintain. My only job was to protect her, to shield our little world from any more chaos. But I failed to account for one thing: the boundless, terrifying empathy of a 6-year-old child. And on that perfectly ordinary morning, she would see what I had trained myself to ignore. Our Saturdays at the Green Bench followed a script so precise it felt like a liturgy. I'd order black coffee and chocolate chip pancakes. Chloe would spill syrup on her chin and tell me elaborate stories about her week, her world a vibrant, uncomplicated place. For 2 hours, I could almost believe the last 18 months were just a bad dream. The divorce from Mara was what people politely call amicable, which is just another word for a slow, quiet bleed. No screaming matches, just a profound mutual exhaustion. We traded our house in the suburbs for a custody schedule and 2 separate apartments in the city. She got the modern high-rise with a concierge. I got a cramped 2-bedroom a block from Chloe's school and the crushing silence that filled it when she wasn't there. So I built the rituals: Saturday pancakes, Wednesday night pizza and a movie, Sunday morning walks to the duck pond. I read every parenting blog that said structure and predictability were the bedrock of security for a child after divorce. I became an architect of normalcy, brick by tedious brick. The Green Bench was the cornerstone. It was all worn wood and mismatched china, with a sprawling oak tree shading the patio. It was loud with the chatter of families and the clatter of plates, a beautiful chaos where a little girl's laughter could get lost in the crowd instead of echoing in an empty apartment. It was ours. It had no history with Mara. That particular Saturday in October was perfect. The kind of crisp, golden morning that makes you forget winter is coming. Chloe, in her pastel pink jacket, was deep in an explanation about why her friend Emma's hamster was definitely planning an escape. "He's been stockpiling food, Daddy, under the bedding. Miss Callahan says that's a sign of advanced rodent intelligence." "Or a sign he really likes sunflower seeds," I said, wiping syrup from her chin with my napkin. She rolled her eyes with a 6-year-old's absolute certainty. "You're not taking this seriously." I was taking it seriously. I was taking all of it so seriously it felt like a full-time job, being present, being consistent, being the stable rock in her shifting world. I was so focused on the map I'd drawn for our new lives that I never looked up to see what was already walking into the territory. And then Chloe stopped, talking mid-sentence. Her gaze slid past me, over my shoulder, her bright blue eyes narrowing with a focus I rarely saw outside of her puzzle books. The chatter of the cafe faded into a background hum for her. "What's wrong, Bug?" I asked. "That lady is sad," she stated matter-of-factly. I followed her gaze. At a small table for one, under the dappled light of the oak tree, sat a woman. She had long, dark, wavy hair and was looking down at what I assumed was an open book on the table. One hand rested on the page. The other was pressed to her mouth. Her shoulders were perfectly still, but even from 20 feet away, I saw the unmistakable glint of a tear tracing a path down her cheek before she quickly brushed it away. My paternal alarm system pinged, low and steady. This was adult pain, complex, private, and absolutely none of our business. This was the exact type of chaotic, emotional undertow I had built our Saturday routine to avoid. "She's probably just really into her book, sweetheart," I said, employing the classic dad diversion. "Some stories are very moving. How about more pancakes?" But Chloe was already sliding off her chair. This was the terrifying empathy I had underestimated. Research says children develop true cognitive empathy around age 6 or 7, the ability to not just feel another's distress, but to take their perspective and want to help. In that moment, my daughter was a living case study. "Chloe, no," I said, my voice low but firm. "Leave her alone. It's not polite to bother strangers." She looked at me, her head tilted. "But she's crying, Daddy. Miss Callahan says we should be kind. Being kind is giving people space when they need it, I countered, a flush of anxiety warming my neck. This was a minefield. A stranger's emotional state was an unknown variable. What if the woman was unstable? What if she snapped at Chloe? The thought of my daughter's open face meeting anger or rejection sent a cold jolt through me. Chloe processed this for about 2 seconds. Then she deployed the unassailable logic of childhood. You always tell me to trust my gut. My gut says she needs a friend. And before I could formulate another defense, she was off. A small, determined figure in a pink jacket, weaving between the patio tables with a purpose that left no room for argument. My heart hammered against my ribs. Every protective instinct screamed to go grab her, to apologize to the woman, to retreat back to the safety of our pancakes. But I was frozen. I watched, helpless, as my daughter approached the table of a weeping stranger. Chloe didn't say anything at first. She just stopped beside the table and waited. The woman, sensing a presence, looked up. Her eyes, glistening and red-rimmed, widened in surprise. She quickly tried to compose herself, offering a shaky, confused smile. I couldn't hear them over the cafe noise. I saw Chloe point to the table, her expression one of pure, unadulterated curiosity. She was asking a question. The woman glanced down, then back at Chloe. She said something, and then the most extraordinary thing happened. The woman's defensive posture softened. She nodded. Chloe, with the unearned confidence of the very young, pulled out the chair opposite the woman and sat down. That was my cue. I was on my feet, my coffee sloshing, a dozen apologies already forming on my lips. I strode over, the protective father swooping in to clean up a social faux pas. As I got closer, I saw the woman wasn't holding a book at all. It was a single sheet of paper, folded and creased, held in trembling hands. The handwriting was dense, covering both sides, a letter, not a novel, a personal, physical piece of someone's heart right there on the cafe table. Chloe was talking softly, her small finger pointing at the letter. Is it a sad story? The woman looked from my daughter to me, her expression a storm of embarrassment, grief, and something else, a flicker of relief at the interruption. She had the poised beauty of someone in their late 20s, but her eyes held a weariness that aged her. I'm so sorry, I blurted out, placing a hand on Chloe's shoulder. She has no boundaries. Come on, Bug, let the lady have her peace. It's okay, the woman said, and her voice was softer than I expected, tinged with the gravel of recent tears. Really, she just asked what I was reading. She offered a faint, heartbreaking smile and gestured to the letter. It's from my brother, he's far away. This was the moment, the point on the map where the path forked. I could follow the script, apologize again, extract my daughter, return to our table and our predictable, controlled morning. We could become a brief, odd anecdote in this woman's difficult day. Or I could break the ritual. Chloe looked up at me, her eyes wide. She's all alone, Daddy. The woman flinched almost imperceptibly at the word. Alone. It hung in the air between us, a shared condition I knew all too well. I saw it then, not just her tears, but the profound isolation in the way she held herself at that solitary table. The research I'd later find flashed in my mind unbidden. Emotional tears are a primal human signal, a nonverbal cry for support that evolved specifically to elicit caregiving. My own rules warred inside me: protect Chloe, maintain the bubble, avoid complexity. But another, older instinct stirred, one that remembered what it felt like to sit alone with a pain too big to hold. Would you, I heard myself say, the words leaving my mouth before my brain could censor them. Would you like to join us? We've got a whole plate of pancakes that's fighting a losing battle. The woman stared at me. The offer of simple human company, in the wake of what was clearly a private grief, seemed to disarm her more than Chloe's approach had. She looked at the letter in her hands, then out at the bustling park, as if weighing an anchor against the current. She took a shaky breath. My name is Ilara, she said. And that's when I saw it. As she went to fold the letter away, my eyes caught the salutation at the top of the page, not a name. A prison inmate number. The The string of numbers and letters where a name should have been. It stared up from the page, a cold, bureaucratic stamp on a human story. My mind, trained to spot irregularities in spreadsheets, locked onto it instantly. Ilara saw me see it. A shutter came down behind her eyes. She folded the letter with a quick, practiced motion and slipped it into the pocket of her coat. The brief window into her grief snapped shut. "Thank you for the offer," she said, her voice carefully neutral now, "but I shouldn't intrude." Chloe, blissfully unaware of the inmate number or the sudden tension, tugged on my sleeve. "Daddy," she said, "yes, she's coming to sit with us." I was caught between my daughter's immutable reality and the sudden, alarming complexity standing before me. The research on child empathy flashed again. Children's helping behavior is often non-discriminatory. They have a general inclination to benefit others, regardless of who they are. Chloe had seen tears and wanted to help. She hadn't seen a prison ID. "You're not intruding," I heard myself say, the words feeling automatic. "Please." Maybe it was the lingering ghost of my own loneliness in that empty apartment. Maybe it was the sheer, disarming power of my daughter's expectation. Or maybe it was the accountant in me, seeing a glaring, unresolved variable. Ilara hesitated, then gave a single, tight nod. We moved back to our table in a silent, awkward procession. I slid into my side of the booth. Ilara, moving with a quiet grace, sat next to Chloe, carefully positioning her bag. The dynamic was instantly, bizarrely domestic. A man, a little girl, and a stranger with a secret in her pocket. Chloe, our fearless social ambassador, broke the silence. "My daddy makes the best pancakes. Well, the cafe makes them, but he orders them." A faint, genuine smile touched Ilara's lips. "That's an important job." "The most important," Chloe confirmed. "I'm Chloe, I'm 6. Do you have any kids?" "Chloe," I said, but Ilara shook her head. "It's okay. No, I don't have any kids, just a lot of thoughts." "I have lots of thoughts too, mostly about hamsters and why broccoli exists." And just like that, they were talking. Chloe launched into the saga of the escape artist hamster, and Ilara listened with a focus that was startling. She asked questions. She remembered the hamster's name was Sprinkles. She didn't look at her phone or glance away. For a 6-year-old used to competing with screens for adult attention, this was pure magic. I sat there sipping my now lukewarm coffee, watching this surreal scene unfold. The protective father in me was on high alert, scanning for threats. But what I saw was a woman who was simply, profoundly sad. The tears weren't hysterical. They were the quiet, exhausted leaks of a burden carried too long. When Chloe paused for breath, finally attacking her cold pancakes, Ilara looked at me. "She's wonderful." "She's something," I agreed, my guard still half up. "I'm Leo, by the way." "Ilara," she said again, as if making it official. A silence fell, this one heavier. The chatter of the cafe filled it. We were two adults, sitting in the aftermath of a child's intervention, with a massive, unspoken thing between us. I took a risk, a small one, tough letter. She looked down at her hands, folded on the table. Her nails were short, unpolished. "The toughest. My brother Matteo, he writes me every week." She left the rest hanging. The inmate number, the prison, I didn't push. Instead, I asked the question that felt adjacent, safer. "Is he far away?" She let out a breath that was almost a laugh. 320 miles. The Rockland Correctional Facility, minimum security, but it might as well be the moon. There it was, laid bare on the table between the syrup bottle and the salt shaker. My mind scrambled. Prison, brother, weekly letters. The sheer weight of that ongoing grief, that weekly reminder of absence hit me. This wasn't about a sad book. This was about a life put on hold, a family fracture with legal paperwork. Chloe, her mouth full of pancake, mumbled, "Is he a pirate?" Ilara's composure broke into a real, startled laugh. It changed her face completely, lighting it up from within. "No, sweetheart, he's not a pirate. He was a teacher, a history teacher." A teacher, the contradiction was jarring. It didn't compute with the cold official number. I realized then the pivot my brain had already made. The inmate ID had triggered a vague, shadowy assumption, a violent person, a danger. but a teacher. What happened? The question was out before I could stop it, a product of sheer narrative whiplash. Ilara's smile faded. She looked out at the park, where leaves were just beginning to turn. He made a mistake, a big one. He tried to help a student who was in trouble, and it backfired spectacularly. She turned her gaze back to me, and it was direct, challenging almost. He's a good person who did a bad thing. The world isn't great with that particular shade of gray. The stakes just escalated. This wasn't just personal grief anymore. It was a moral morass. A good person, a bad thing, a teacher in prison. My neatly ordered world of custody schedules and pancake rituals had no box for this. Chloe, sensing the shift in tone, looked between us. Did he get a timeout? Another choked laugh from Ilara. Yes, Bug, a very long timeout. Our food was gone. The clock was ticking toward the handoff to Mara. The predictable end to our Saturday was looming, but the conversation had blown a hole in the side of the routine. I couldn't just say goodbye, not to this. Will you be here next Saturday? Chloe asked, voicing the question I hadn't dared to. Ilara seemed surprised. I don't know. I usually just come when the quiet of my apartment gets too loud. You should come, Chloe declared. We are always here. It's our tradition. You can have a tradition with us. The offer, issued with the authority of a 6-year-old queen, hung in the air. Ilara looked at me, a question in her eyes. Was this a child's whimsy, or was I endorsing it? The sane answer was no. This was complicated. This was a potential drama bomb with an inmate number attached. I had a daughter to protect from instability. But I also saw the flicker of something in Ilara's face, not hope, that was too strong, but a faint, terrified longing for connection, for a Saturday that wasn't about waiting for the mail. I knew that longing. I'd felt it every Wednesday evening after dropping Chloe off. We are here at 10, I said, my voice quieter than I intended. Same table, the offer stands. Ilara held my gaze for a long moment, then nodded. Okay, maybe I will. We parted ways outside the cafe. Chloe waved until Ilara disappeared around the park path. In the car, on the way to Mara's, Chloe was pensive. She's really sad, Daddy. I know, Bug. Are we going to help her not be sad? I don't know if we can, I said honestly. Some sadness is very big. But we can try, she stated, with pancakes. The following week was strange. The airtight bubble of my post-divorce life had been pierced. I found myself thinking about Ilara at odd moments while reviewing a tax ledger, while folding Chloe's tiny socks. The image of that inmate number, the teacher, the weekly letters. It was a puzzle with missing pieces, and my mind kept trying to solve it. Saturday arrived. As we walked to the green bench, I felt a nervous anticipation I hadn't felt in years. Chloe skipped ahead, confident. I scanned the patio the moment it came into view. And there she was, at our table. She saw us and lifted a hand in a small, tentative wave. Something tight in my chest loosened. She came. This time it was easier. We slid into the booth, Chloe immediately launching into an update about Sprinkle's latest alleged tunneling efforts. Ilara had ordered tea. She looked less brittle, though the shadows under her eyes were still there. After the food arrived and Chloe was suitably occupied with coloring the kids' menu, Ilara looked at me. Thank you for last week and for not running away when you saw the return address. It was a surprise, I admitted. It usually is, she said softly. It becomes the first thing people see. Prisoner's sister, not archivist, not Ilara, just that. You're an archivist. At the City Historical Society, I organize other people's old letters, she said, with a trace of irony. I guess it makes sense I'd fixate on my own. The conversation began to flow, skirting the giant elephant in the room, but exploring the space around it. She was witty, sharp, with a dry humor that emerged as she relaxed. She asked about my work and actually listened to my answer about corporate tax structures. She remembered Chloe's teacher's name from a story the week before. It felt terrifyingly normal, and that was the most dangerous part. When the check came, I reached for it, but Ilara was faster. Please, you've given me company. It's worth more than pancakes. As she handed her card to the server, I saw it. A well-worn photo tucked into the clear sleeve of her wallet. A younger Ilara, beaming her arm around a young man with the same dark, kind eyes and a wide, easy smile. Mateo, before. She caught me looking and didn't hide it. She slipped the photo out and placed it on the table. That was his graduation. He was the first in our family to get a master's degree. We lost our parents young. It was just us. The pride in her voice was devastating. I looked at the face of the man behind the inmate number. He looked like someone who'd help you move a cooch, not a criminal. What? I started, then stopped. What was the bad thing, Ilara, if you want to tell me? She took the photo back, tracing its edge. He had a student, a good kid but from a bad situation, fighting at home, falling grades. Mateo tried to mentor him, give him a safe place after school. The kid got into a fight off campus, seriously hurt another boy, and it came out that the kid had shown Mateo a knife he'd started carrying weeks before, out of fear. Mateo told him to get rid of it, talked to him about conflict resolution, but he didn't report it to the administration. He thought he was building trust, that he could handle it. A cold understanding dawned, failure to report, and contributing to the delinquency of a minor. The other boy's family pressed charges. The school district needed a scalp. He pleaded guilty to avoid dragging the kid through a worse trial. He got 3 to 5 years. He served 2. The gray area she'd mentioned wasn't gray. It was a chasm, a moral catastrophe born of a teacher's compassion. He tried to help, broken a black and white rule to navigate a gray human situation, and his entire life had collapsed into a numbered cell. My carefully ordered world, built on rules and schedules and predictable outcomes, shuddered. What was the right answer here? Follow the procedure or try to save the person in front of you? Chloe, sensing the heavy silence, looked up from her drawing. Is that your brother? He has a nice smile. Ilara's eyes filled. He does, doesn't he? That was the day the weekly tradition solidified. Ilara became a Saturday fixture. Chloe adored her. She brought Chloe books from the Historical Society about local history, sparking a fascination with old buildings. She helped her with her letters. In turn, Chloe's relentless, joyful presence seemed to pull Ilara, inch by inch, out of her shell of grief. I was falling into something I hadn't signed up for, a friendship that felt like a lifeline tangled around a secret I was now keeping. Mara knew nothing about Ilara. How could I explain this? Oh, we met a woman crying over a letter from her brother in prison, and now she's our best friend. The lie of omission began to weigh on me. One Wednesday evening, after I dropped Chloe at Mara's, my phone buzzed. A text from Ilara. Bad letter today. The parole board date was pushed back again. Bureaucratic shuffle. Another 6 months of waiting. The quiet is really loud tonight. I stared at the message. This was the escalation. The boundary between Saturday morning confidant and weekday support system was blurring. The prison wasn't just in Rockland. Its shadows were reaching into my phone, into my nights. I didn't have the right words, so I sent the only thing that felt true. Do you want company? The quiet in my apartment is pretty loud too. An hour later, she was on my sofa, holding a mug of tea. She wasn't crying. She was just empty, defeated in a way that was harder to witness. I'm sorry, she said. I shouldn't have dumped that on you. Isn't that what friends are for? I asked, the word friends feeling both inadequate and hugely significant. She looked at me. Is that what we are, Leo? The question hung in the air, charged with all the unspoken things. The shared Saturdays, the growing comfort, the way her presence had begun to fill the silent corners of my life. The terrifying, exhilarating sense that I was no longer just a dad navigating a custody schedule, but a man being seen by a woman. Before I could answer, my phone rang. The screen lit up with Mara's name. The real world, with its schedules and obligations, was calling. I excused myself and took the call in the kitchen. Mara's voice was crisp, all business. Leo, I need to switch weekends next month, the 15th through the 22nd. I have a conference in Miami, and David and I are extending it into a short vacation. I'll take extra time the following month to make up for it. David, her new boyfriend, the one with the convertible and the vacation plans, a familiar, old resentment bubbled up, mixed with the guilt of having Ilara in my living room. Our carefully constructed co-parenting agreement felt like a flimsy contract next to the raw human need in the next room. Yeah, I said, my voice tight. Fine, send me the dates. You okay? She asked, hearing the strain. Just tired. Well, get some sleep. You have Chloe this weekend. I ended the call and leaned against the counter. Two worlds were colliding. The clean, compartmentalized world of the divorce decree and the messy, emotionally fraught world I was building with Ilara. When I walked back into the living room, she was standing by the window, looking out at the city lights. Everything okay? She asked. Just logistics, I said, rubbing my temples, the other part of my life. She turned, understanding dawning on her face. Your ex-wife. Co-parent, I corrected automatically. It's fine, she's taking a vacation. Ilara was quiet for a moment. You never talk about her, about what happened. I let out a long breath. It's not an interesting story. We grew apart. We wanted different things. She wanted excitement. I wanted pancakes on Saturday. I gestured vaguely, encompassing the quiet apartment, the routine, the life she'd just become a part of. There's nothing wrong with wanting pancakes on Saturday, she said softly. In that moment, the distance between us felt like it was measured in inches, not feet. We were two people, standing in the quiet, holding different kinds of loneliness. The attraction I'd been quietly denying surged, a live wire in the still air. But the inmate number, the parole board, the complication, it was a wall between us. She must have seen the conflict on my face. She looked down, gathering her bag. I should go, thank you, Leo, for everything. She left, and the apartment felt quieter than it ever had before. The silence wasn't just an absence of noise now, it was an absence of her. The following Saturday, everything changed. Chloe, in her infinite 6-year-old wisdom, decided to play matchmaker. As we finished our meal, she looked at Ilara with deadly seriousness. Ilara, do you have a boyfriend? Ilara nearly choked on her tea. Chloe. It's a fair question, Chloe said, mimicking my own phrase back at me. My daddy doesn't have a girlfriend, and you don't have a boyfriend, and you're both always sad when you're alone, so you should be together and be not sad. The blunt child logic arrow hit its mark with devastating accuracy. Ilara and I stared at each other, a blush climbing her neck, panic flooding my system. Lily, Chloe, I mean, you can't just, I stammered. But Ilara was looking at me, and in her eyes, I didn't see panic. I saw a reflection of my own terrifying hope. The unspoken thing was now on the table, right next to the syrup. Chloe, satisfied she'd solved the problem, went back to her juice. Ilara leaned forward, her voice low, just for me. She's not entirely wrong, you know. My heart stopped. This was the pivot, the point of no return. This was no longer just about offering a seat to a crying stranger. This was about stepping off the map entirely. Before I could formulate any kind of response, yes, no, maybe, it's complicated, my phone buzzed violently on the table. Not a text, a call. Mara's name flashed again. A cold dread, completely separate from the emotional vertigo of Ilara's words, washed over me. Mara never called during my custody time unless it was an emergency. I excused myself and answered, stepping a few feet away. Leo, Mara's voice was sharp, urgent, and laced with something I rarely heard, fear. You need to come get Chloe, right now. What, why, what happened? Just come to my apartment, now, and Leo. Her voice dropped to a furious whisper. Who the hell is Ilara? The ground dropped out from under me. How did she know her name? I turned back to the table. Ilara was watching me, her face pale. Chloe looked confused. I have to go, I said, my voice strangled. Right now. I didn't explain. I just threw cash on the table, grabbed our things, and hustled Chloe out of the cafe with a mumbled apology to Ilara. In the car, Chloe was full of questions I couldn't answer. Is mommy okay? Why are we running? Everything's fine, Bug. We just have to see Mom a little early. But we didn't say goodbye to Ilara properly. The guilt was a physical burn in my chest. I'd left Ilara sitting there, the unspoken confession about our feelings hanging in the air, now poisoned by panic. I drove to Mara's high-rise on autopilot, my mind racing through possibilities. Had Chloe said something? Had Mara seen us somewhere? The doorman gave me his usual dismissive nod. The elevator ride to the 12th floor felt like an ascent to an execution chamber. Mara opened the door before I could knock. She was still in her sleek athleisure wear, but her posture was rigid, her eyes blazing. She didn't even greet Chloe. "Go to your room, sweetie. Mommy and Daddy need to talk." "But Now, Chloe." The use of her full name did the trick. Chloe, wide-eyed, scurried past her into the apartment, casting a worried look back at me. Mara closed the door and faced me in the minimalist hallway. "Start talking, Leo. Who is Ilara Collins?" The use of the full name confirmed my worst fear. She hadn't just heard the name in passing. She'd investigated. "She's a friend. We met at the cafe. Chloe likes her." "A friend," Mara repeated, her voice dripping with disdain. She pulled her phone from her pocket, tapped the screen, and thrust it at me. "This friend." It was a local news article from 2.5 years ago. The headline, "Local Teacher Sentenced in Knife Incident." There was a small, grainy photo of Mateo Collins looking shell-shocked in a courtroom, and in the background of the shot, partially blurred but unmistakable, was Ilara, her hand over her mouth, eyes squeezed shut. My stomach turned to Lade. "Where did you find this?" Chloe been chattering about her new best friend, Ilara, for weeks. How nice she is, how she brings her books, how she's always sad about her brother. I got curious. A simple Google search of Ilara and brother in prison, and our city did the rest. She snatched the phone back. "Her brother is a convicted felon, Leo. He's in prison for weapons and contributing to the delinquency of a minor. And you've been letting this woman with direct ties to a criminal, spend every Saturday with our daughter." "It's not like that," I said, the defense weak even to my own ears. "Her brother made a mistake. He was trying to help a kid." I read the article. He failed to report a deadly weapon. A child was severely injured. That's not a mistake, Leo, that's negligence. It's a pattern of poor judgment. And now his sister, who is clearly entangled in this, is in my daughter's life because you were too lonely or too stupid to do a basic background check. Each word was a scalpel. The tidy, corporate lawyer in her had assembled a damning case, and I was the incompetent defendant. "Ilara is not her brother," I said, forcing my voice to stay level. "She's a good person, she's an archivist, she's been through hell." "I don't care," Mara's composure cracked, revealing raw maternal fear. "My job is to protect Chloe, from physical danger, from emotional instability, from bad influences. You've introduced an unknown variable with significant baggage into her routine. What if this brother gets out and comes around? What if he's dangerous? What if Ilara is so messed up from this that she has a breakdown in front of Chloe?" The questions were my own worst fears, given voice by the one person with the power to act on them. "You're catastrophizing." "Am I, or am I being the only responsible parent here?" She crossed her arms. "This ends today. You will not see this woman again. You will not bring her around Chloe, ever." The ultimatum landed like a judge's gavel. The two worlds that had been colliding finally crashed. My life with Chloe, governed by Mara's approval and the custody agreement, and my budding, fragile life with Ilara were now mutually exclusive. "You can't dictate who I'm friends with, Mara." "I can when it involves my daughter's safety and well-being," she shot back. "And if you choose to continue this friendship, then we have a real problem. I will not have my daughter exposed to that environment. I'll file for a modification of the custody order. I'll argue you're making reckless choices that jeopardize her stability. And given this," she waved her phone, "I like my chances." It was a nuclear threat, and she meant it. The amicable divorce was over. We were now in a war, and Chloe was the territory. I felt hollowed out. So that's it, an ultimatum. "It's a boundary, Leo, one you should have set yourself." I left her apartment minutes later, my head ringing. Chloe was confused, asking why I wasn't staying for dinner as I sometimes did. I hugged her too tight, told her I loved her, and walked out into the hallway feeling like I'd been gutted. I sat in my car in the underground garage for a long time. Then I texted Ilara. "Can we talk? It's urgent." She responded instantly, "My place." An hour later, I was sitting on the edge of a sofa in her small, book-filled apartment. The space was neat but lived in, walls lined with shelves of old volumes and archival boxes. It smelled like paper and chamomile. She handed me a glass of water, her face etched with concern. "What happened? Is Chloe okay?" "Chloe's fine, it's Mara. She knows about you, about Mateo." I watched the color drain from her face. She sank into an armchair opposite me. "How?" "Chloe talks," Mara Googled. I couldn't bring myself to tell her about the photo in the article, her private grief made public. "Oh God," she buried her face in her hands for a moment. When she looked up, her eyes were resigned. "And she wants you to stop seeing me." "It's not a request, it's a threat. She'll go for full custody if I don't." Ilara nodded slowly, as if she'd been expecting this script. "Of course she will, she's a mother. I'm a liability, a walking red flag." She gave a bitter, hollow laugh. "This is why I keep to myself, Leo. This is what the prisoner's sister title does. It's a contagion. It touches everything." "It's not a contagion," I said, but it sounded feeble. "Isn't it?" She stood and walked to a bookshelf, pulling out a thick, leather-bound album. She opened it and placed it on the coffee table between us. It was filled with letters, all in the same neat handwriting, each in its own plastic sleeve, dozens of them. "These are all from Mateo. Every week for 2 years. This is my life. The waiting, the hopping, the fighting a system that sees him as a number. This is what you're signing up for if you choose this, whatever this is between us. It's not just Saturday pancakes. It's parole hearings and lawyer fees and the constant shadow of a mistake that wasn't even yours." She was giving me an out, a clear, rational path to retreat, to choose my daughter and the clean, uncomplicated life I'd built. But as I looked at the album, I didn't see a liability. I saw devotion. I saw a sister's unwavering love. I saw the depth of character I'd fallen for. "I don't care," I said, the words surprising me with their conviction. "You have to care," she whispered, tears now flowing freely. "You have a child, she comes first. She always comes first. I know that better than anyone." And that's when she told me the rest, the part the newspaper article hadn't covered. "The boy who was hurt," she said, her voice trembling. "His family, they're powerful. His father is a city councilman. They wanted Mateo made an example. They pressured the school, the DA. They've even blocked his entry into a rehabilitation program that would look good for parole. It's not just about the law anymore, it's a grudge. And people who carry grudges like that, they don't stop. If they found out his sister was involved with a man who has a young daughter, they could use that. They could try to paint you as unfit too, by association. Mara wouldn't even need to fight. They'd do it for her." Wait, it gets worse. This wasn't just about Mara disapproval. This was about being caught in the crossfire of a vengeful, politically connected family. My fight for Chloe could become a public spectacle, with Ilara's family history as the centerpiece. The room spun. The stakes had just exploded from personal to potentially legal, public, and vicious. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked, my voice hoarse. "Because you need to know what you're really walking into," she said, her gaze steady through her tears. "It's not a romance, it's a war, and I've already lost so much. I can't be the reason you lose Chloe." It was the most selfless and heartbreaking thing anyone had ever said to me. In offering me the full, ugly truth, she was giving me permission to leave, to choose the safe path. I stood up. I walked to the window, looking out at the city lights, just as she had in my apartment, 2 lonely people in separate boxes of light. I thought about Chloe's face, her trust, her routine, the security I'd fought so hard to build for her. Then I thought about the hollow silence of my apartment, the way it only felt like a home when Chloe or Ilara was in it. I thought about the research on tears, on how they're a primal signal for connection. Ilara had been sending that signal in a crowded park, and against all my rules, I had answered. I turned to face her. I'm tired of being afraid, I said, echoing my own realization from weeks before. I spent a year building a fortress to keep the chaos out, but you know what? Fortresses are lonely places, and I don't want to be safe anymore. I want to be happy with you. She shook her head, a fresh wave of tears falling. Leo, no. I'm not choosing between you and Chloe, I said, crossing the room and kneeling in front of her chair. I took her hands. They were ice cold. I'm choosing to fight for a life that includes you both. Mara can threaten, this councilman can grudge, but I am not abandoning you because your family is in pain. That's the opposite of what we should do. It was a declaration, a terrible, possibly foolish, romantic declaration in the face of a looming tsunami of consequences. Ilara looked at me as if I was speaking a language she'd forgotten. Hope, that dangerous, fragile thing, flickered in her eyes for the first time that night. How, she breathed. How can we possibly? I don't know, I admitted, but we start by not hiding. We start by talking to Mara together. We lay it all out, the whole story. We show her who you really are, not a headline, not a risk, a person. It was a naive plan, a Hail Mary, but it was the only path forward that didn't involve a surrender that would break me. We spent the next 2 hours crafting our case. We gathered character references for Ilara from her work. We printed out positive evaluations of Matteo from before the incident. We compiled the letters from his students supporting him. We prepared to face Mara not with defiance, but with transparency. As I was leaving, Ilara stopped me at the door. Leo, she said softly, if this goes badly, if you lose time with Chloe because of me, I will never forgive myself. I cupped her face in my hands. Then we have to make sure it doesn't go badly. I drove home that night not with dread, but with a strange, clear-headed resolve. The chaos was no longer outside the walls. I had let it in, and now I had to learn to live with it, to build a new kind of order within it. The meeting was set for Tuesday evening at a neutral coffee shop. Mara arrived with a folder of her own. She barely acknowledged Ilara. I didn't let her set the tone. I told her everything. From the first moment Chloe walked over to Ilara's table, to the truth about Matteo's case, to the political grudge holding him back. Ilara spoke softly, with devastating honesty, about her loneliness, her love for her brother, and her affection for Chloe. We presented our packet of materials. We didn't ask for approval, we asked for understanding. Mara listened in stony silence. When we finished, she didn't look at the papers, she looked at Ilara. Do you understand, Mara said, each word measured, that my only priority is my daughter's safety and emotional well-being? I do, Ilara said, and if I ever thought I was a danger to her, I would disappear. But I love Chloe. I would never let my family's situation touch her. Mara held her gaze for a long, tense moment, then she closed her folder. I need to think about this. I'll be in touch. It wasn't a yes, but it wasn't an immediate no. It was a stay of execution. The following days were agony. The silence from Mara was deafening. I had to carry on with Chloe, pretending everything was normal, while my future hung in the balance. Then on Friday afternoon, my phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize. A man's voice, polite but cold. Mr. Leo Grant, this is Robert Vance. I believe you're acquainted with Ilara Collins. Vance, the councilman, the father of the boy who was hurt. My blood ran cold. The war had found us. The voice on the phone was calm, which made it worse. I understand you've inserted yourself into the Collins situation, Robert Vance said. I'd like to discuss why that's a significant error in judgment. I was standing in my kitchen, the afternoon light suddenly feeling clinical and harsh. I'm not sure what you mean, Mr. Vance. Let's not play games, Mr. Grant. My son's life was forever altered because of Matteo Collins' negligence. His sister is emotionally entangled with that failure. And now you, a single father with a young daughter, are involving yourself with that family. It shows a profound lack of discernment. He wasn't yelling. He was analyzing, dissecting. a politician laying out a logical argument for my surrender. What happens in my personal life is my business, I said, my throat tight. Until it isn't, he replied smoothly. Your ex-wife Mara is rightfully concerned. I've spoken with her. She's a reasonable woman. She understands that stability for a child means keeping clear of turbulent influences. He had spoken to her after our meeting. He'd gotten to her first. The cold calculation of it took my breath away. What do you want? I asked, the fight draining out of me, replaced by a cold dread. I want you to step away from Ilara Collins. Completely. I want you to focus on being a stable father to your daughter, far away from the collateral damage of my family's tragedy. In return, I will consider your association a momentary lapse. I won't feel the need to highlight your questionable judgment to family court should Mara pursue that route. It was an elegant threat. He wasn't going to sue me. He was just going to make sure everyone in a position of power knew I was the kind of man who associated with a felon's family. He would poison the well of my character without ever raising his voice. And if I do? He sighed, a sound of profound disappointment. Then you leave me no choice but to protect my family's interests. Mateo Collins has a parole hearing in 60 days. I have devoted friends on that board. Your continued involvement with his sister could be construed as an endorsement of his character, which would be unhelpful for him. And for you, Mr. Grant, chaos has a way of spreading. Don't let it spread to your little girl. The call ended. I stood there, the phone slick in my hand. He had mapped out the dominoes with terrifying precision. Step away from Ilara, or watch as Mateo's chance at freedom evaporated and my own custody of Chloe was put in jeopardy. I called Ilara. She listened in silence as I relayed the conversation. When I finished, there was a long pause. I'll go, she said, her voice a flat, dead thing. I'll move, change my number. You can tell him I'm out of the picture. It's the only way. No, I said, but the word lacked force. He had outmaneuvered us. He wasn't attacking us. He was offering us a choice where the only winning move was to lose each other. Leo, he's right about Chloe. You can't risk her. I won't let you. She was crying now, quiet, resigned sobs. This was always going to be the ending. I let myself hope for a different one. We hung up. The silence in my apartment was absolute. I had faced the chaos, and it had calmly, rationally asked me to choose which piece of my heart to cut out. I didn't sleep. I paced. I thought about Chloe's face. I thought about Ilara's smile, so rare and bright. I thought about Mateo in his cell, his fate now partially in my hands. I was trapped in a moral equation with no clean solution. The next morning, a Saturday, I took Chloe to the green bench. Our table felt like a crime scene. She chattered, but I was a ghost, nodding along. Halfway through her pancakes, she put her fork down. You're sad, she stated. And Ilara isn't here. Did she get lost? The innocence of the question shattered me. Something like that, bug. She thought for a moment, her small face serious. When I get lost, you tell me to be brave and ask for help. Maybe Ilara needs to be brave and ask for help. Out of the mouths of babes, the sheer, stupid simplicity of it cut through the tangled mess of threats and politics. We had been trying to fight a political operator with transparency and packets of paper. We had forgotten the fundamental currency of human emotion. An idea began to form. A terrible, risky, possibly futile idea, but it was the only one that didn't involve surrender. I called Ilara. We're not giving up, but we're changing the battlefield. What does that mean? It means we stop playing defense. We go see Robert Vance, not to plead, to listen. Ilara was terrified, but she agreed. I called Vance's office and, using every bit of stubbornness I had, secured a 15-minute meeting for Monday afternoon. I didn't tell him Ilara was coming. We arrived at his modest city office. He was courteous, cool, expecting my capitulation. When Ilara walked in behind me, a flicker of surprise, then irritation, crossed his face. This is not what we agreed, Mr. Grant. We're not here to agree or disagree, Mr. Vance, I said. We are here to ask you one question. What would it take for you to let this go? He leaned back in his leather chair, steepling his fingers. Justice was served. I'm not holding on to anything. I'm ensuring a dangerous lack of judgment isn't rewarded. Your son, Ilara said, her voice trembling but clear. How is he? Vance's mask slipped for a second. Raw pain flashed in his eyes before he shut it down. He's none of your concern. But he is, she pressed gently. My brother's life is ruined because he failed your son. I live with that every day. You live with your son's pain every day. We're in the same prison, Mr. Vance. We're just in different cells. The room went very still. The political operator was gone. In his chair sat a grieving, angry father. Your brother, Vance said, each word sharp, should have reported the knife. A simple rule, he broke it. My boy's jaw was wired shut for 8 weeks. He has nightmares. He quit the soccer team. He's not the same person. I know, Ilara whispered, and Matteo will carry the weight of that until he dies. He's not asking for forgiveness. He's asking for a chance to do some good with the rest of his life, to prove that his failure wasn't who he is. Keeping him in that cell forever, it doesn't heal your son, it just makes 2 broken men. I spoke then. You threatened to take my daughter from me to make a point about stability, but what lesson does that teach her? That when someone is drowning, we should weigh the cost of the rope. My daughter taught me that lesson. She saw a crying stranger, and her first instinct was to ask, what's wrong? Not is it safe? Not what will people think? Just, what's wrong? Vance looked between us, his jaw working. The anger was still there, but it was mingled with something else, exhaustion, the exhausting burden of carrying a grudge. What do you want from me? He asked, the fight leaving his voice. Don't block Matteo's rehabilitation program, Ilara said. Let the parole board make their decision based on who he is now, not just on who you need him to be to justify your pain, and leave Leo and Chloe out of it. Their family has nothing to do with yours. He was silent for a full minute, staring at a framed photo on his desk, a picture of his son, smiling before the fight. Get out, he said quietly, not looking at us. We left, not knowing if we had just made everything worse. The wait was agony, 60 days. Mara called me a week later. Vance's office called me. They said he was withdrawing his concerns. What did you do? We talked to him, I said, as people. She was quiet. Ilara still comes with baggage, Leo. Everyone does, I replied. Hers is just got a prison postmark. Another pause. I don't like it, but Chloe is happier when she's around, and you seem less like a ghost. We'll take it slowly. She can come to birthday parties, public outings, no overnights at your place yet. We'll reassess in 6 months. It wasn't a blessing. It was a cautious, monitored truce, but it was a path forward. The day of Matteo's parole hearing arrived. Ilara was a nervous wreck. We waited by the phone in her apartment. When it rang, she was too afraid to answer. I picked it up. It was Matteo's lawyer. His voice was tired but clear. He was approved, with conditions, 2 years of supervised release, mandatory community service, but he's coming home. Ilara collapsed into my arms, sobbing with a relief so profound it shook her entire body. The war was not over, but the longest siege had finally lifted. 3 months later, I stood in the visiting area of Rockland Correctional, holding Ilara's hand. The door opened, and a man in civilian clothes walked through. It was Matteo, thinner, older than his photo, but with the same kind eyes. He saw Ilara and his face broke into that wide, easy smile. Their embrace was wordless, a lifetime of letters and grief and hope communicated in the tightness of their grip. When they finally parted, Matteo turned to me, his expression serious. You're Leo. I am. He extended his hand. Thank you for being her harbor in all this. I shook it. She was mine too. That night back in the city, the 3 of us, me, Ilara, and Chloe, had dinner at the Green Bench. It was loud and messy, and Chloe talked a mile a minute, telling Matteo all about hamsters and history. It was the beautiful chaos I had spent so long fearing. A year later, almost to the day, I proposed to Ilara at that same table. Chloe, now 7, officiated the practice ceremony with a paper crown. Mara attended the real wedding with David and even danced with Matteo, who who was thriving in his job at a nonprofit that helped at-risk youth. The surprising detail came 6 months after the wedding. I received a letter in the mail, handwritten on expensive stationery. It was from Robert Vance. "Mr. Grant," it read, "my son is in therapy, it's helping. He recently said he doesn't think Mr. Collins is a monster, just a teacher who was in over his head. I'm not writing to apologize. I am writing to say that your metaphor was incorrect. We were not in separate cells. We were in the same one, just blaming each other for the lock. I am working on my own. Please do not contact me again." It was the closest we would ever get to peace from that quarter, and it was enough. The bomb my daughter lit did detonate the life I'd carefully rebuilt. It shattered the sterile, safe fortress I'd made. But in the rubble, we found better materials. We built something messier, more resilient, and infinitely more alive. We built a family not from scattered pieces, but from pieces that had been through the fire and chose to fit together anyway. Chloe is 8 now. Some Saturdays, it's just me and her at our table. Some Saturdays, Ilara and Mateo join us. Sometimes, even Mara and David pop by for a coffee. The ritual is the same: pancakes, chatter, syrup on chins, but the shape of the table has expanded. The central question, the one about the cost of kindness, was answered. The cost is everything you think you want. The payoff is everything you never knew you needed. It's not a safe transaction. It's a wild, terrifying leap into the messy, beautiful chaos of other people's lives. And it all started because a little girl saw tears, a primal human signal for help, and instead of looking away, she walked over and asked the simplest, bravest question in the world. "What's wrong?" So what do we take from a story like this? When we see the research, that children develop true cognitive empathy around age 6 or 7, that emotional tears are an evolved signal for care, it's easy to view it as abstract psychology, a neat fact about human development. But this story isn't about abstract facts. It's about the terrifying, tangible cost of living those facts. Chloe's empathy wasn't a developmental milestone. It was a lit fuse. My desire for safety wasn't prudent parenting. It was a fortress against life itself. Ilara's tears weren't just a biological signal. They were a silent scream in a crowded park that only one person, the person with the least reason to be cautious, was brave enough to answer. We spend so much of our adult lives learning to filter, to assess risk, to build sensible boundaries, and those are necessary skills. But somewhere in that process, we often build walls so high we can't see the human beings on the other side. We mistake isolation for safety and routine for living. The lingering question this story leaves me with isn't about whether it was right or wrong. It's about what we lose when we stop listening to that primal, childlike instinct to connect. The research suggests this instinct is our baseline. We are wired from infancy to respond to distress, to offer comfort. We learn the hesitation later. Our world is filled with people holding folded letters of grief, letters of loss, of failure, of secret pain. They sit at tables everywhere, in cafes, in offices, in the apartment next door, putting on a brave face, sending out those silent, tearful signals. The real radical act may not be the grand gesture. It may be the willingness to make room at your table, to share your pancakes, to ask, "What's wrong?" and then have the courage to stay for the answer, even when that answer comes with an inmate number or an angry ex-spouse or a politically connected foe. It's a risk. It will cost you the pristine, controlled life you thought you wanted. It will introduce chaos. But within that chaos is the only thing that ever really makes the loneliness bearable: genuine, messy, complicated human connection. Chloe is growing up. She's learning about social filters, about stranger danger, about all the sensible rules I need to teach her. But I hope, more than anything, that she never fully unlearns the lesson she taught me, that sometimes the most sophisticated thing you can do is the simplest: see a person in pain and choose, deliberately and bravely, not to look away. If this story resonated with you, if it reminded you of a moment of unexpected connection in your own life, I'd love to hear about it. Share your story in the comments below. And if you want more documentaries that explore the messy, beautiful fabric of human relationships, hit that subscribe button. You never know what story might find you next. Thanks for listening.